Well, I think the last time I talked on the camera here and prepared an upload, I finished with a scripture. And you might wonder, well, how come you have to mix scriptures into everything? I'll talk to you more in detail about that, but let me just say it this way for now. I have found out that the scriptures serve for me as kind of a validation. We've talked about the transcendental movement and how everybody has the innate power to tell truth intuitively. And I firmly believe that. I believe that we have something within us that tells us right from wrong and gives us a choice. And that we have an agency that will never be taken away and has existed forever with us. And that agency is critical to our growth and development. Well, so you might say, well, then why do we need scriptures if we can tell truth intuitively? Why can't we tell truth intuitively without the scriptures? And my answer to that is I think we can. I think we can. But the scriptures for me validate my thinking. And when I draw a conclusion, I say that, intuitively I believe this, and invariably I'll be reading in the scriptures and it'll say the same thing over again. So it's like, okay, chalk that up for another win. And it gives me some comfort to do that because I believe the scriptures are divinely inspired. I don't mean to say that they might not have misconceptions or misinterpretations, because if you follow how the Bible and so forth was put together, it went through some trials and the Council of Nicaea, where they had to decide what to put in it and what to leave out, and all of that wasn't necessarily all done according to the way maybe it should have been. But there's lots and lots of good things in the scriptures, and I find myself being validated quite often by them, and it works the other way around too. Sometimes the scriptures will get your mind thinking about it, and you'll start to see it validated in nature and other ways, and I reflect on those things, and I kind of refer to it as all the arrows start pointing in the same direction. And the more of those arrows you can get pointing in the same direction in your mind about things, for me anyway, it has been a good feeling, because it's like, okay, not only do I believe it, but I've got validation after validation after validation that my belief is right. And they just keep stacking up if you're onto some truth that you can actually live by. So today I'm going to start out with a scripture rather than end with one. And then we'll see where all this goes. It's a short one again. And you might think when I'm reading this that I haven't got many days left, and who knows, maybe I haven't, but here we go. It's from 2 Timothy chapter 4. This one's verse 7. And maybe those of you that know me can tell me whether this is true pertaining to me or not. I have fought a good fight. I have finished my course. I have kept the faith. You might say, well, I understand what it is like to fight a good fight. And we might take a little time to explain that a little bit more. But I have kept the faith. Faith is the belief in something that you can't actually see. It's just something that you feel in here. And it tells you it's right. Even though you can't see it, you feel it. it rings a bell inside of you and it says, bingo, get after it, this is right. And you thought I'd lost that little bell, didn't you? I haven't used it for a time or two. I think we might keep using that. I'm kind of falling in love with it. And like I said, anymore, if I get a prompting as I'm going through the day, instead of just getting a prompting, I hear little bells going off in my mind, thinking, okay, you better do it. And even today, I won't go through everything, but there's been a number of things that have happened today when that little bell has gone off in my mind and I've reacted to it. And it's caused me to, in one case today, it stalked me to turn around. I was going out of a parking lot. I saw a crumpled up Taco Bell cup on the road. I had to kind of straddle it to get over it as I was going out of the parking lot, and I kept going out of the parking lot, and I heard this, go pick it up. And I said, no, I don't think so. Somebody else will get it. It's right close to the garbage can. Somebody will see that and pick it up. And guess what? I heard this again, and it took 3 times. Finally, I just turned the vehicle around and drove around the other side of the parking lot. Came back in it, got out of the car, picked it up, and took it. I think I was headed to Walmart. I took it over to Walmart. By the way, when I was picking it up, I saw a bunch of other stuff, so I picked that up as well. When I was going into Walmart, I put it in the garbage can. So, big deal. Big deal. Well, to me, it was kind of a big deal because I felt a good feeling when it was over. It's like the bell rang and I answered it. And again, if you haven't watched that that upload that I made called the Arabian Horse Obedience Training Allegory, YouTube that. It's about a 5-minute video that explains the whole thing about how God works with us. And just like they rang the bell to get that horse turned around, the Lord rings that bell to get me turned around. So I live by it, and it's kind of cool. Makes your relationship with the Lord stronger as you go through the day. When that happens, you start to feel like you're not pulling in the harness all by yourself. You're pulling in it with a higher force that really cares about you, wants to help you out, tries to teach you. So it's fun. Watch that allegory. Arabian Horse Video Training Allegory. 5 minutes and something, and you'll get the drift. There's a lot of, I've pushed that now 2 or 3 times on here. But I'm hoping you take the time to YouTube it. It comes right up, and it'll give you the drift of what I think is important. Because that little bell, if we take it to the transcendental, is knowing truth intuitively. That little bell is teaching us to hear the truth in teaching moments, and it becomes like I said, I'm kind of getting attached to that little bell. I'll show it to you closer up because it cost me, I think, $5, and I'm not sure what that little symbol there is in the front of it, but it has kind of a little heart-shaped thing or a triangle-shaped thing, and we'll call it a triangle. I'm not sure how. I ought to look that symbol up because there might be something to it, but triangle is, remember this channel is called MTC, Me, Thee, and Charity. Well, guess how many points there are on a triangle? So there you go. That little triangle's got a significance already. Me, thee, sometimes with a small t, sometimes with a capital T if I'm thinking deity, small t if I'm thinking about my fellow man, and then charity. Again, I haven't really got into charity, and it's the most essential of all of it. And I might tell you right now that I've kind of kept this a secret up till this point, but I think I can mention it, even though I haven't developed it yet. I have another YouTube channel reserved, and it's called Charity 4, like the number 4, Charity for You. And I've taken a whole journey in the last 30 or 40 years of my life down a path that has this charity word written all over it everywhere I go. And it's become really meaningful to me. And there's stories to tell, but I'm kind of reserving this particular channel just to get into more of the things that have happened in my life and what I've learned from them. And I'll develop that a little later. We might throw some of this stuff in here because it does mean a lot to me. Well, so that scripture I read, I have fought a strong fight. I have run my course, finished my course. I have kept the faith. I hope that can be said about me when I die. I'm not there yet. I am not there just yet, so don't weep. You might not weep anyway, but I'm not announcing that I've got some horrible disease and I'm going to leave this earth right away. But I hope they can say that of me when I leave. So today I'm going to talk a little about finishing the race. Who knows? I don't know. Speaking of race, this thought came to me. When I was in high school, I used to run, there's only a couple of races that I ran. And both of them were, back then when they weren't 400 meter, we called them 440, they were yards. I know everything's gone meters now, but back in those days it was yards. And I ran what they called the 440-yard open, which means you just get in the starting blocks, and when you hear the starting gun go off, you run just as hard as you can, clear out the track until you get back where you started, and it was 440 yards because that's how big the track was. It's one of the hardest races, I believe, in track, particularly high school track. And the coach that asked me to do it told me that. He says, I don't think there is a harder race. Even the mile and the 2 mile. He says, I don't think is a harder race because when that gun goes off, you're going to sprint just as fast as your little legs will go until you get clear around the track and back here again. And it's one thing to run a 100-yard dash. It's another thing to run a 440-yard dash. And I can still remember to this day when I think back on that. Because I know, well, let me just add this. I not only ran the 440-yard open, but sometimes on the same day, almost every track meet on the same day, I would be asked then to be the final leg of the mile relay. Of course, the mile relay is 4 times around the track, so that's another 440 yards. And they would have me run the final leg. I guess they thought I could close the gap if they were behind. I don't know. That's a lot of faith to put in me because I was not a track star by any means. However, I did run the hurdles and do pretty well. But I would run this 440-yard dash twice in every track meet. And I got to the point where I dreaded those track meets because when that gun went off, I knew I just had to give it everything I got. And the thing I remember about it is I remember getting off to a good start, and then as I go around, it just got harder and harder. And if you were out of shape at all, your legs would start to feel it. And then when I come back across the finish line, I was considerably slower than when I started, so it wasn't a full sprint. But it wasn't a full sprint because I didn't try. I tried to sprint the whole way. And when I come back across that track meet, it was just exhaustion. It was just sucking air. And the thing I remember most is I could feel blood in my mouth. I could taste it. Maybe I shouldn't say I could taste it or feel it, but I could taste it. It was like like my mouth was lined with blood. And I don't know if any of you have run track and had that same feeling or not, but with me, it was just regular. It was every time I'd run that race and get that bloody taste in my mouth, and I'd just have to walk it off. And sometimes I'd have to go over and lean on something and just gasp and try to get my breath back. Because sometimes those races were close together and it just grueling on me. Now, I think my coach kind of liked the idea that I have to do something grueling because he coached me a lot in basketball and football too, and track was in the spring of the year. I think he kind of looked at it like, well, we'll get you in shape for another season of football and basketball, if nothing else. And so I ran that race and I tried. Which brings me to another memory. There was this important track meet that we had, and I don't know, for some reason, I ran the hurdles, and I didn't have time to get the open 440 in there, and I'm still on the relay team, but I didn't have time to run the 440 race, and so the coach put our sprinter, he could just fly down the track. I mean, we called him, his name was Spencer, and we called him Spinny. And he spun, I'll tell you what, when that gun went off, he was like a firecracker coming out of those blocks. And for 100 yards, he just streamed so fast and be way ahead of everybody. He'd win almost every race. And I think he took a region and went to state and won a lot of awards with his 100-yard dash accomplishments. But in one particular track meet, the coach said, Spinny, he used to call him Spinny too. He said, Spinny, we need somebody to run the 440 open. And I can remember Spinny saying, I've never run that before. How do you run it? And the coach said, just like he told the rest of us, he said, you just start running and you don't stop. You sprint just as hard as you can for 440 yards. Well, Spinny hadn't run that race before, 440 yards, and he'd run the 100 meter or the 100 yards, and he just cleaned house on that race. And sometimes they'd even put him in the 220-yard dash, and he'd beat that one too. And so this was just a stretch. They thought, hey, if he can do the 100 and the 220, certainly he can do the 440. And so they put him in that race, and we were all kind of interested to see how it went because Spinny was fast, but he was not noted for his training regimen. You know what I mean? He liked to party on the weekends, and was a little rougher when he, along his partying than some of the rest of his farm kids were. We didn't know about that kind of partying, I don't think. But anyway, he'd run this race, and we all watched him take off. and he took off just like a lightning bolt. I mean, when that gun went off, he was just like the 100-meter. He was out in front of everybody, and he was still out in front of them when he reached the 220. And we thought, oh man, Spinny's going to be our 440 man from here on out. He's just going to wipe everybody out. So we were watching him. He got to the 220 mark, and he started to fade a little bit. And by the time he got to the 300 mark or 330 or whatever it was in that area, he started to fade pretty fast. Everybody that he beat up to this point in the race started to catch up to him and pass him up. And by the time he got to the 440-yard mark, which was back to the beginning, he was just barely moving. I mean, it was everything he could take to just get across the finish line, and everybody had beat him, with the exception, I think, of one person. And I'll never forget what the coach said to him on the bus, because he was talking to all of us and kind of congratulating us on this and that. And he says, "And Spinny, that 440 race I put you in, that was the best 330 I've ever seen anybody run." And we all laughed because we knew what happened after the 330. He died, and everybody passed him up before the finish line. And I've always kind of remembered that with a chuckle, because back to my scripture again, I have finished the race. I have fought the good fight. I've finished the course. I have kept the faith. Well, anyway, I think it's Spinny. Enough of that. I'm going to show you something else I'm thinking about when it comes to finishing that I hope it'll add value or meaning to you because of mistakes that I've made. I'll show you this. You see that? Well, that's what you get when you get the highest award in Eagle Scouts. It's called the Eagle Badge. And I've got one of them. And I'm not talking about this tonight because I've got one of them, but I want to tell you about that badge and how it kind of ties into this other stuff I've been talking about, finishing the race and kept the faith. Let me just mention that the whole Boy Scout program was a wonderful thing for me, and mostly due to my mother, who would take me around to all the Boy Scout merit badge appointments and sit out in the car while I went in and talked to the county agent or some government official about government processes and all kinds of hoops, I guess you could say, I have to jump through to get merit badges, because you had to have so many and of different kinds. Some of them required, some of them not, but you eventually climbed up through the ranks, and you went from tenderfoot scout to, I think it was first class or second class, and then first class, and then star scout, and then life scout, and then the grand prize was the Eagle Scout, and you get this award. So let me talk to you a little about that. In our ward, the church was the sponsoring organization for the Boy Scouts, and long story short, the church, our church was a combination of three previous wards that had diminished in size, and they consolidated them down now to where there was only one ward where there used to be 3 and even 4. And but at that time only 3. And this friend of mine, and I got together, and we found out that there had never been an Eagle Scout in any of those 3 wards before. None of those sponsoring organizations had ever had an Eagle Scout. And we were young enough that we thought we could pull that off. So we decided we'd, together, not one of us try to beat the other one out, but just together we would become the first Eagle Scouts. Not scout, but scouts, because we wanted to hold each other's hands across the finish line, I guess you'd say. And so we worked together, but we also had to do our own thing. And I can remember one of the things that we had to do was, it was in the, it runs in my mind, it was about March, because I can remember there were still snowbanks plowed up along the roads, but the roads were bare, and it was, and we were trying to get a hiking merit badge. And I don't remember exactly how it went, but we had to do so many 5-mile hikes, and then had to do a 10-mile hike. And finally, the grand hike was a 20-mile hike. We had to go on a 20-mile hike. Well, it was kind of the middle of the winter, at least it was if you looked at the snowbanks along the sides of the roads, and we didn't know where we were going to hike, but we finally figured it out. It's okay. It was just a hike. We could hike along the roads, and as long as we hiked for 20 miles, we'd fill the requirement. And so one Saturday, I started hiking from my house, and I hiked for a 1.5 2 miles over to this friend's house that lived not too far away. Well, quite a ways away, but not in country miles. It wasn't that far, but I hiked over to his house, and then we just kept hiking, and we went down and got onto a bigger, not necessarily a bigger road, but it was more traveled, and we just kept hiking and hiking and hiking, and we'd figured it out that if we hiked clear around this loop that went clear down to the east and then cut back through that to the west and back up to where our church house was, and then we came clear back home, that it would be 20 miles. However, it wasn't quite 20 miles. Turned out that we'd checked it in a car, or had our parents check it in a car. One of them, I think my friend had his parents check it in the car, and it turned out to be just a little bit less than 20 miles. But still, we thought that would work. So away we went. Well, when we got clear around about 15 miles into the hike, we got to the little town where our church was, and my friend said, don't you, that we're not going to get our 20-mile hike in. If we just go from here to home, we won't make it. It'll be like 19 point something. I forgot what he said. Anyway, it won't be a 20-mile hike. We'll fall short of that. And it seemed like I said, does it really matter if we're off like a half mile? I mean, what's the big deal about that? If you hiked 19.5 miles instead of 20, won't that count? And I remember talking about that, and he didn't feel right about it, and he kind of convinced me that it was the wrong thing to do too. So when we got to the little town where our church was, we decided, well, before we can finish the rest of our hike and get home, we got to hike around some blocks up here. It wasn't that big of a city, but it had some looped roads that we could hike around on and make up the difference and actually get our 20-mile hike and call it legitimately a 20-mile hike. Well, we did that. And I've thought back on that often, and I've thought, I'm really proud of him. His name's Stephen, and I was just really proud of him. Proud of Stephen for saying, something that's not right to hike 19.5 and call it 20. Nobody's going to know, but it's still not right. And we could have hiked 19.5 and called it 20 and still got the merit badge. But we didn't. We did it the right way. So you learn from experiences like that, and you appreciate good people around you and good friends that kind of keep you on the straight and narrow. I hope you have those kind of friends. I hope you don't have the kind of friends that want you to do something you know doggone well you shouldn't do. Because it does, it makes a difference. Well, so what's that got to do with this? Well, let me just explain. This, getting a reflection of my light, this Eagle Scout thing, I have it in a keepsake drawer. I don't see it that often. But every time I see it, after all the work that I'd put into all those merit badges and working up through all those different ranks and trying to be just as faithful as I could, every time I look at that, it's tainted. Tainted. Let me explain why. When you finally get to the point where you've passed all the requirements, they require that in our case, we had to drive up to Pocatello, Idaho. And I think it was called the Tenderfoot Council back then. I'm not sure what it's called now. But that was the council of the Boy Scouts that we were in. And they had some executives up there that insisted that Eagle Scouts, those who are about to receive their Eagle Scout badge, come up and interview with them and make sure they were the kind of boys they were wanting to receive the merit badges. They'd ask them a few questions. It was about a 2-hour drive to get to Pocatello. My parents both went. And I went with them. We didn't go with our other friends because I don't know what the reason was, but I guess just to be alone and talk. Anyway, we went. I went along with just my parents. And my friend was up there too with his aunt and uncle. His parents had died earlier. So he didn't have parents living, but he was up there too. Well, so you sit in a room and you wait, and of course you wonder what they want to talk to you about anyway. And so I can remember going in and they had this guy come in, and I remember sitting in a room waiting for him for a while, getting nervous. I'm not sure that was by plan or not that you get nervous, but I was pretty nervous about it because I didn't know what they were going to ask me. I thought, I'd done everything about right, and I was thinking, gosh, what if I mess up now? I still won't get it. So he came in and he talked to me. He's a friendly guy. Talked to me about my experiences and what I've done, and went through the Scout Law and the Scout Oath. And part of the Scout Law was to be, I'll say it. It says, Scout is trustworthy, loyal, helpful, friendly, courteous, kind, obedient, cheerful, thrifty, brave, clean, and reverent. Well, that particular oath, we went down through one of them, talked about each thing, and he'd ask me a question or two. And I thought everything went fine until he got to one question, and I stubbed my toe, so to speak, as I answered the question. And it was this very question that tainted my Eagle Scout badge forever. I'm not sure that I've ever told anybody until right now. But he asked me, he says, one of those things, trust or clean and reverent. He says, "Are you clean?" I said, "Yeah, I'm clean. I have a bath and brush my teeth." And then he said, "Do you make your bed?" And normally I could have just answered, "Yes, I do," and been honest about it. But that particular morning, I didn't, and that's exactly what was the next question. He said, "Did you make your bed this morning?" Guess what? I got nervous, and I thought, if I answer, in my mind, I thought, if I answer no to this, I'm not going to get my Eagle Scout badge. And so I lied. I just straight out lied. I said, yes, I had, when I knew that I hadn't. And then it went on, and I don't know whether he could pick up on the tone of my voice or the way I acted or whatever. He didn't say anything if he did. And long story short, I got the Eagle Scout Award. But it was always, I always felt like it was a little tainted because I had lied about a question in my final interview. So I'm back to this scripture again. Okay. I have fought a good fight. I have finished my course. I have kept the faith. Not so much because I lied. I didn't keep the faith. And I've had a Eagle Scout badge in a little container that's sitting in my keepsakes that to this day stays there, and it's tainted. It's not as meaningful to me as it could have been had I told the truth. Always tell the truth, even if it gets you in trouble, even if it's not the kind of thing that you hope would come out. Tell the truth, because you'll live with the consequences. One way or another, you'll live with the consequences if you don't. Nobody knew after that, just me. But I knew. When I look myself in the mirror, and right now when I'm looking myself in the camera and thinking about that award, I think, you messed up. The award isn't as valuable, not as meaningful to you as it could have been. So, will you learn from my experience and just look somebody in the eye and tell them the truth, even if it would have meant that I'd lost the award, which I'm sure it wouldn't have. But even if it had, it was the right thing to do. It's never okay to violate your conscience, I guess is the way I'd say it. When you know truth intuitively and you violate it, you violate it. And there's consequences to that. Well, I don't want to belabor that point other than to say that the Boy Scout program was a good program for me. Who knows, I might go into other merit badges and things I've learned sometime when I get thinking about things. But for right now, I talk about finishing the race and you know, like I said before, invoking Thoreau again, he said, when you die, kick the dust. So finish the race strong, even if you're in your deathbed. And I hope I can. I've repented for that lie. You'd think that's, maybe I haven't repented enough because maybe I just forget it, but I haven't forgotten it. And it lingers, and that's kind of what happens when you make bad choices. So don't make them. That's my counsel to you. And don't look at me and think I'm any better than anybody else. In fact, I might be a lot worse. I don't know, but I'm just trying to get there. Trying to make a difference in this world. And I hope that by me telling you a story that I lived with and didn't shine too well on my character, that it might help your character not suffer the same consequence, because I love y'all and I wouldn't want you to have to pack it around. All right. There you go. See you later. Love you.